She's from Australia. Like she's in her third year in Monash University, and she's doing digital art. So yeah.
I guess I'll start. This is something I did last year. Most of my works, surprisingly, I did during lockdown. In Australia, in Melbourne, we had a long lockdown, and I got a lot of art done during it, so there was at least that plus side. And this was one of them. I started digital art when I was like maybe 14, 15. I sold my guitar to get a tablet, and things just went from there. And something I like about digital art is the fact that you can use layers. There's the lovely undo button. You can erase things without like ruining the material, and yeah, you can just play around with how things look without changing anything. So I always make copies of things. You can move them around. So an example of is this is how I printed the final piece, but I played around with like the shapes and moving them around, and like that evokes a very different feel to. Hold on, no, it's gonna freeze. To something like, oops, like that. Like it's a lot spaced out. This one looks very like morbid. You're just seeing feet. You're really confused what it is, but I'm not really altering anything that I've done, so I can do this without being scared that I'm losing anything. Whereas when you work traditionally, like on paper with paint, if you make mistakes or if you want to alter things, it can be a lot more difficult to go back to something that you liked before if you don't like it now. Yeah, I think I'll spend the rest of the time taking you through a work of mine. Don't worry, I've saved all these elsewhere. I'll take you through a project from start to end. So one of the works that I've done is this one. It's called Gangen. I'll send the link in the group chat maybe, and then if you guys want to open it on your own device, you can. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Let me copy and paste it. It's so quiet. Okay. There's that if you want to open it on your own, but I'm going to screen share as well, so you can just look as well. Yeah, okay. So this, I hate Zoom. No, I don't. Okay, this started during Melbourne's second biggest lockdown. That was after July, and it lasted for maybe 3 months. And it started with, as most of my ideas start, a brainstorm. So we had a project, this was for uni, and we had a project where we had to make something site specific. They wanted people to use real materials and make sculptures or something that took place in a certain environment. But because I don't like doing things in real life and I like digital stuff, I tried to trick it. And at the start, I wanted to make something like a Google Maps of my hometown. I'm from Wollongong. If anyone's from Australia, that's near Sydney. And yeah, so at the start I was thinking about that. I was thinking about ways to like cheat this project so I didn't have to make anything physically, because I really wanted to just avoid that at all costs. So I started with a brainstorm of ideas, and that moved to images. Oh my gosh, sorry, my computer's so slow right now. And moving from there, I honed in on, like, from Google Map images, I got my mum to take photos of specific places that I was familiar with. And this was while we were in lockdown and I was isolated on my own, and my parents were 800 kilometers away and my home was 800 kilometers away. So from there, I settled on this idea of like doors. And that was the start of my project that turned this very rough, very messy sketch into this, where you can open these doors on this website by hovering your cursor over them. And I liked the idea of doors because they're this kind of like in between where you're not really inside or outside, because depending on the context and depending on how you feel about the space you're in, you can be inside or outside, if that makes sense. Um, Also, I'm Indonesian. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. So like a lot of my works, they revolve around like partially around my heritage, because coming to Australia where everyone speaks English, I'm very lucky that my parents kept the language in our family, so I can still speak Indonesian. So this word kangen means to miss or to long for, and that's what I was feeling those emotions, and so I created a work around that. And so from these doors, they're based on the rooms in my house, like our family home. So that's the front door. This is the bathroom. This is like that's the toilet. This is the bathroom. This is my my room. Sorry, like I don't know my own house. This is my brother's room, and this is my parents' room. And so all of these were made through Photoshop, basically, is how I draw them. And I did, so I basically did this frame first. And then the door is literally just like a white rectangle that I just altered the shape of for every frame. And then you just change it for each frame. So the way I animate is usually through frame by frame, because it's a lot more time consuming, but this one's only like what, 38 frames, but it's a lot more rewarding when you do finish it and you can have control of every single frame and how it looks. Yes, I'll keep going. So there's that part of it, and that didn't take me too long. Each of these probably, with the gifts, like with the movement, probably only took like a few days total for each one. So that's maybe like 2-3 weeks for each, for all the 6. And then in one of my other classes, we were experimenting with JavaScript. I don't know if anyone else does coding. But with that, I had this idea of so with these, you don't see the door, like it's just a white thing, right? But with this, I had the idea of like actually showing the physical door, and what was on it and how that has identity in it. So on the outside, all the doors might look the same and they all have the same handle. My house has this like antique looking handle, but on the like interior, you see like coats are getting hung up, and I don't know, that person's belongings just being hung on there. Or like I was thinking about, I don't know if anyone did this, but when you're younger, you'd be measured with your siblings. So like they measure you every month and you have those markings on the door. Yeah, so something like that. That brings identity to like this door that just comes with a house that you move into and you have no ownership of it until you live. So there were those. And these were just like photos I asked my parents to take while they were there. So it was just whatever was on there, that's what I would draw on it. And this is the front door, number 2. Nobody find out where I live, please. Yeah, so I played around with that, going with the identity of the door. And then I moved the project into a greater thing, which became like the house as a whole, and how I've lived there. So my family moved I was born in Indonesia, and we moved back and forth for a while. And my siblings lived in Indonesia for a few years while they were younger. But I've lived in this house my whole life, whereas they've lived in other houses in Australia when they were younger, because we moved around a lot. So this house for me is the only home I've known. And I found that really special, just because I think moving around a lot, it's pretty hard. If you moved around a lot, it would be pretty hard to find like a grounding. Whereas when I see this home, or when I see that town, because I've lived there my whole life, everything just feels, even if I go back and I haven't been for a year now, or like half a year, but every time I go back, it still feels very familiar. So I was looking at the shape of the house, and I moved, sorry, trying to find it. Yes. If this loads. Yes, so I did like a quick outline of the house, which didn't take that long. And I just found it too boring. So I was trying to think of ways to spice it up a little bit, add something fun, and make the project, like as a whole, the exhibition as a whole, a bit more interactive. And so I was thinking about sound and how I could incorporate that into the artwork more than just like visuals. And I came to an idea where I would incorporate conversations because we were so far away. The only way I would talk to my family was just like through phone, like through FaceTime or phone calls or whatever. And I would be calling them a lot more often because we were so far away. So when you hover over a certain window, I don't know if you guys can hear this.
Iya, atau juga panjang tapi ada kantong juga nggak apa-apa.
Can you hear that a little bit?
Aku sama kok aku kan pegang dompet kanan.
So each window is, when you hover over it, it's just like layered conversations of me with the person that sleeps in that room. So this is my parents' window, so it would just be they're just conversations in both Indonesian and English, whatever I was speaking at the time with them, all throughout lockdown. And I recorded them without their permission, but I got their permission at the end to put in like a live website. And so as you move around, that's also my parents' room, but then there's me and my sister, so it would switch to English. For some reason, I only speak English with my siblings.
Huh? Oh no, what did you say?
And then this is like the living room was all the bottom floor, so it was just different conversations, like all layered together that weren't with any specific person. The front door was our knock. So my family and I, we have like this secret knock, which is no longer a secret now that I'm sharing it with everyone. But it's this. Which we live in a dodgy street, so when one of us knocks on the door with that knock, we know like we can open the door, it's safe, it's one of us. And then I had conversations with my brother. He moved out of home like a while ago, so any conversations with him were few and far between at the time, because he was working. And yeah, so with this kind of presentation, you don't, with the lights turning on and then you don't like just ebbing and flowing on, you don't really get to see the whole house. But you do get this weird intimate view of the house because you're hearing the people that live in it without seeing what the exterior looks like. It's like a strange thing that I decided to do. And then the backlight is, if I can find it, it's just the dial tone of a phone call because I didn't, like, no one lives at the back. So yeah, from there I kept going. We had like, I think I had an extra week or two for this project and I'd finished most of my stuff, so I kept going and I made this. So that is the transcription of the knock in like notes. And I made this kind of music sheet that has text messages, so it's still on this like tone of communication. And these are text messages that I'd sent with like between myself and my family, and so they're in Indonesian, but and like also in what's it called, like just shortened phrases, like hati tu is like be careful, but you write hati hati, but then if you're too lazy to write that, it's just like slang and you just write that. And then if you click it, you can translate it to English. So like, is it raining there? Yeah, we'll be all day. If it's pouring, take an Uber, okay? Like just mundane, casual conversations, that text messages that you just send between your family and your parents and whatnot. And the only word I didn't translate was kangen, which is the title of the piece. And yeah, so that was this project. And I chose to like present it this way. Anytime I make Photoshop works or like digital works, I always paint them in A0 size just in case I want to print them later on and like make them large prints, because I feel like a lot of my works look better when they're larger because they've got a lot of detail. And so it allows you to like look into it if it was real on a wall. But I quite enjoy making these kind of, I've made a few of them now, like website, what's it called? Like website exhibitions where anyone from wherever around the world can view it and interact with it and still get a similar effect. And if it was in real life, I don't even know, like these might be printed, but then you wouldn't get the effect of the movement, so it would just be a physical thing, or like it could be a video projection. At the start, I've got these white walls in my apartment that I was planning on projecting, but I couldn't get a projection shipped to my house fast enough, so I didn't do that. But I think just like doing it on a website and making it just interactive, even just like a computer in the corner of a gallery where someone can just play on it, is something quite nice, because it doesn't limit what you can see and how you can interact with it. And like if you're this tall, you're viewing it at this height and you're seeing different things as someone that's shorter, or if you, I don't know, the way that you move around a piece might be impacted, and that impacts how you see it as well, which I try to limit if it's just on a computer. But then again, privilege to technology and privilege to a computer is something else, but that's a whole other discussion. Yeah, I guess I'll talk about my last project I'll talk about is probably this hand one. This one, I'll quickly play it for you if you like. If I make it big, tell me if you can still see this. Does everyone still see that? Okay. I'll quickly play it. It's only 20 seconds. There's no sound. That's that. I haven't looked at that since last year, so it's definitely a bit rough. I could fix it up, but that's that project. And basically how I did that is pretty simple. Let me just close these. Oh yes, there is some detail. If you guys want to see some of the detail in the doors that you can't see on the website. Yeah, that's the bathroom. Okay, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. The hands, I started with this. The reference I used was my own hand, and I just like took photos of my hand in different poses, and then I started with this sketch. Very rough, as you can see, as most of my sketches start out to be. And then I moved to just doing the individual parts. Oh yeah, I cleaned that up. And so I just did each section of the hand on its own. Once I did that, and the needle, I exported them out as different layers, and then I used Adobe, I forgot what it's called, not Adobe Premiere, the other one. After Effects, that's it, sorry. I used Adobe After Effects to do the like movement, that's why it's so smooth. And once I did that, I exported that video, because that comes out as a video. I took that out and converted it to layers. And once you have the layers, you've got, how many frames is this one? I think this one was only like 200. No, 120, there you go. So you've got that many frames in 20 seconds. And from there, I just drew every single like layer of the thread. So every time the thread moved, it would be a different layer. And you could see, let me see if I move this up, oops, you can just see like all the different layers I drew. And so that took maybe, for each of these animations, I would say like a few days of just doing it. But it's not too much because I'm not working with color. If you haven't noticed already, I have a theme of like black and white and one color, just because, not that I don't like color, but it makes it easier when it comes to animating things, because you don't have to worry about like lighting or shading and that kind of thing. But eventually maybe I'll advance to something like that. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else. Oh, maybe I should check the chat. How did I come up with the knock? Oh, yes, the knock from my family was, I don't know, I think my brother came up with it. I think it was him or his friend. One day he came, yes, no, it was his friend. He came and he knocked on the door that way, and he always knocked on the door that way, so we just kind of adopted it, and we were like, well, now we know. And yeah, there's this. And so for this project, I'll open it up. It is here. This one was at the start of the first lockdown in Australia. And I titled it Stock Take because I was still working at that time. Now with lockdowns, sometimes you can't work because if you're a casual, yeah, sometimes you can't. That's just the reality. And so at the time, because I was still working and we were just doing stock take a lot, it was just this like monotonous. No one's coming in the store because we're in lockdown, but then you're still like there and you're standing, but you're counting all this stuff that the owner owns, but you're selling to other people, and you feel like this, like a bit of a robot. And so I was just fascinated with this idea of like either people becoming robots or people becoming turning to stone. And so I made these 3 animations of like a hand, a leg, and ribs. At the start, I think I can show you. At the start, I was planning on doing like a whole body, and I had oopsie. Oh, I should have organized this better. I'm so sorry. I don't know where it went. Oh, it's here. Yes. Yeah, I just like collaged this just from random pictures on the internet. And that's a lot of the things. If I don't know what I like envision, I just collage a bunch of pictures until I see what I want, and then I find it. And I was inspired by, if anyone's watched it, Anatomy of a Murder. And just the idea of like muscles and how they kind of all connect like jigsaw puzzles, but we don't really see the connection because we cover it with clothes and things. But then those clothes, they have like openings. So I was running a lot during lockdown, and I have, if anyone's seen those, like, I used to do this to t-shirts too, where you'd cut like a thumb hole in like a shirt so that you could like put it in there and then it would feel like a glove. But just that idea of like you're masking or like camouflaging like half of your hand, and then your hand looks different. If that sounds too out there, I don't know. That was just my brain at the time. And just fascinated with like if people wear rings, it's like you're cutting off that part of your hand, but you still see your hand. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I was fascinated with that, and then I continued with the idea of like stock take and this like, are we just, as humans, are we just a collection of all these random parts that come together and just live? Like, are we nothing more than that? And so I decided to, I work at a bookstore, so with my like bookstore brain and alphabetizing, I decided to draw all the organs, like all the human organs, but order them in alphabetical order, not like order of how they are in the body. And I still have, so this is one of those works where I did do something not digital and mixed it with the digital. I still have the receipt roll. I just took one from work that I drew on. But I only drew on it to my height. So it was kind of this weird metaphor where the height of this receipt roll and this like, as if you were buying all these organs, came out and you bought me, if that makes sense. So like me as an individual is just this list of organs, and I connected them with the same thread that the animations are connected to. And so yes, that is that. And I just took photographs with them just to store them. But ideally, if I was to be exhibiting this, it would probably be the animations playing on a loop as a projection, and or maybe like on some monitors, these photographs on a wall, and I would just have like the receipt roll just kind of like rolled out on a like flat table where you could just interact with it and open it up more. And yeah, that is that. I think is that all the time I have, or should I keep going? Jess, Emmy?
Yeah, I think you wanna, start about your history with digital art, like how you get into digital art, like.
Yeah, sure. I can talk about that. I'm just gonna flick through my website as I do it. Also, this website is live if anyone needs to see it. It's Lavoynne.com. And I coded it myself. So I guess with digital art, the first thing I did, I didn't show on this because it was terrible. It was so bad. I vividly remember it, and I think I made like a comic strip about a girl and a boy falling in love in a cafe. My fantasies started young, but it was like terrible. It was inspired by a lot of like, I maybe this isn't the case now, but when I was younger, I was just very much inspired by manga and anime and that kind of style. I wish I still had photos of it now, but yeah, so that was the first thing I ever did, and it was this strange comic. And I remember two of the slides. I didn't know anything about like Photoshop brushes, and so I just used like all the default ones. And there was one of like stars or snowflakes, and I used that to color in the eyes because I don't know. But yeah, now I've evolved. This was the first animation I did. I'll see if I can play it. I should be able to. This is in 2016, and it was just a very simple one. But my love for animation started quite young because I've always like loved Disney, Pixar, that kind of thing. And obviously, a lot of those are 3D, but they did start like as 2D drawings. So yeah, this was one. There is sound, so I'll see if you can hear it. It's a minute, sorry. Supposed to loop. Yes, sorry. That, wow. I've also not watched that since, and that needs a lot of fixing. But yeah, I was 15 when I made that one. And we've developed since, hopefully. What was I saying? Oh yes. Yeah, and I had a phase where I started to do a bit of color, but I didn't really continue with that. Color just hasn't been my forte. And since then we've moved to, this was the first project where I mixed digital art with traditional arts. So this is my brother, well, what he looked like at the time. And so I mixed these like watercolor stains. I mixed a watercolor painting and a like ink painting with a digital painting. So that was all digitally painted. And that's my sister. And it was just about like their personalities and my memories of them and how that shapes them as a person. There is a young me, my mom, and my dad. And so all the like skin looking aspects are all digital. And these were presented as prints at the time. And now I do very much black and white things. Yeah. Yeah, I've always just loved digital art. And at the time when I first started, there wasn't really a lot going around. I think the main artist that I saw was like Loish, if anyone knows her. She's like a Swedish, yeah, Swedish? No, she's from Norway. Sorry. But yeah, Loish was like the only one that was around, and that was the only one. And Instagram wasn't that big yet, so I didn't really see a lot. But now there's a lot more digital artists, and like with things like the iPad Pro and whatnot. I don't have an iPad, but things like that, a lot more people are getting into it, which I'm very excited for because I like seeing new projects and how people manipulate that kind of media, whether it be like using photos and manipulating that and collaging those, or doing whatever with those, or just like drawing from scratch from like a blank. Yeah,